Can palmistry truly predict death? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to age like fine wine, moving through their later years with vitality and clarity, while others appear to grow old far too quickly? Have you asked yourself what it is that makes the difference between those who live to a ripe old age and those whose lives seem to end prematurely? Here's a mind-blowing fact that may challenge everything you think you know. Only about 5% of seniors are able to maintain high levels of physical and mental sharpness beyond the age of 70. The truth about longevity and the way we age is far more complex than any prediction written on the palm of your hand. In today's video, we'll embark on a journey to explore an age-old question: can palmistry, this ancient art of interpreting the lines on our hands, actually tell us when our time is up? Is it possible that these lines, which have been studied for centuries, hold the secret to unlocking our lifespan? Or are they just remnants of our human desire to predict the unpredictable? I'll share with you some surprising insights from real-life stories that challenge conventional beliefs and take a deeper look into the science and philosophy behind longevity. You'll discover how modern science, ancient wisdom, and mindful living all play a role in shaping how we age, and whether the lines on our palms are truly the key to unlocking the mystery of life and death. But here's the catch: if you're someone who's easily unnerved by discussions about death, this video might push your comfort zone. But if you're curious, open-minded, and ready for some eye-opening revelations, then stick with me until the very end. I promise you'll leave with a fresh perspective on how to live a longer, more fulfilling life. As we dive deeper, we'll also explore how Eastern philosophies like Buddhism view the impermanence of life. Does the Buddhist approach to aging and death provide a deeper understanding than the predictions of palmistry? I'll walk you through these concepts and give you the tools to think about aging not with fear, but with wisdom and compassion, so don't go anywhere. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll have not just a new perspective on palmistry but also a blueprint for living a longer, healthier, and more peaceful life. You won't want to miss this, trust me. The lifeline, one of the most analyzed lines in palmistry, is the curved line that begins between the thumb and the index finger, wrapping around the base of the thumb and extending towards the wrist. It is often considered the roadmap of a person's vitality, health, and major life events. The lifeline, often revered as the key to longevity, has been the subject of fascination for centuries. Yet, does this delicate curve on our palm truly hold the secrets of our lifespan, or is it merely an illusion shaped by human desire to predict the unpredictable? For centuries, people have looked at this seemingly unassuming crease and wondered, does it truly reveal how long we will live, or is it merely a reflection of our fears and aspirations? Is the lifeline a mystical script written in our flesh? Or simply a biological imprint formed by genetics and repetitive hand movements? Across cultures, the lifeline has been interpreted in diverse ways. In ancient Chinese palmistry, a bold, deep lifeline was believed to symbolize robust qi energy, the vital force flowing through one's body. Meanwhile, in Indian Samudrik Shastra, a short lifeline was sometimes thought to indicate a life filled with spiritual awakening rather than physical longevity. One of the most intriguing cases in history is that of Emperor Qianlong of China, one of the longest reigning monarchs of the Qing dynasty. Historical records suggest that his palm lines, according to fortune tellers of his time, were average in length, neither too long nor too short. Yet, he lived to almost 90 years old, a remarkable feat in an era when life expectancy rarely exceeded 50. His secret? A life of discipline, mental tranquility, and a deep engagement in calligraphy and meditation, practices that, in modern terms, contributed to reduced stress and improved cardiovascular health. Contrast this with the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, whose hands were often analyzed by 19th-century palmists. Some claim that his lifeline was long and uninterrupted, an omen of strength and longevity. However, his reckless ambition and unrelenting stress led him to an untimely demise at the age of 51. This juxtaposition raises a crucial question: is it the line that dictates life, or the life that dictates the line? Consider also the case of Jeanne Calment, the French woman who holds the record for the longest confirmed human lifespan, 122 years. Her lifeline, when analyzed posthumously by palmistry enthusiasts, was described as moderately long but not extraordinary. What was extraordinary, however, was her mindset, her ability to embrace joy, practice gratitude, and live free of unnecessary worry. The real power of the lifeline, then, may not be in its length, but in how we interpret it. A broken lifeline does not mean a broken destiny, it may simply signify a life with many transitions, transformations, and rebirths. A short lifeline does not herald an early death, it may indicate an intense, eventful existence where every moment is lived with passion. So instead of seeing our palms as maps that confine us to a predetermined fate, perhaps we should view them as reminders that our health, our choices, and our state of mind are the true architects of our destiny. Throughout history, the idea that our palms hold the key to our fate has both fascinated and unnerved people. Do the markings on our hands truly whisper secrets of our mortality, or are they mere coincidences shaped by our subconscious fears? The heart line and the fragility of life. The heart line, arching beneath the fingers, is said to reflect not only love and emotions but also the very pulse of life itself. In palmistry, an irregular, fragmented heart line has often been interpreted as a sign of cardiac vulnerabilities, perhaps a susceptibility to heart disease, arrhythmia, or even a sudden cardiac event. Consider the case of Queen Victoria's beloved consort, Prince Albert. Historical accounts suggest that Albert suffered from ongoing health issues, with signs pointing to heart problems exacerbated by stress and grief. If a palmist had examined his hand, would they have seen the fractures in his heart line, foretelling his early demise at just 42, the head line and the shadows of the mind? The head line, stretching across the palm beneath the heart line, is believed to govern intellect, decision-making, and neurological health. A deeply sloping head line, especially one with tiny crossing lines, has been associated with a predisposition to strokes, dementia, or nervous breakdowns. A chilling example comes from the great Russian writer Leo Tolstoy, who suffered a cerebral stroke at the end of his life. His own writings often hinted at his internal battles. His mind, once sharp as a blade, eventually succumbed to frailty. Had a palmist read his hand, could they have foreseen the decline of one of the greatest minds in literature? The mount of Saturn and the weight of fate below the middle finger. The mount of Saturn is often linked to karma, fate, and the length of one's journey through life. A well-developed mount suggests a steady, disciplined existence, often leading to longevity. But a flat, weak, or fragmented mount, some believe it indicates a life plagued by chronic ailments, depression, or even an untimely death. It is said that Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's most powerful leaders, had an underdeveloped mount of Saturn, a supposed sign of great ambition but ultimate downfall. Whether by destiny or misfortune, his exile and early death at 51 seem to echo the warnings of his palm. Lines may guide, but they do not command. While palmistry offers a poetic, mystical way of looking at life and death, science and personal choices hold far greater power over our destiny. Many with seemingly unlucky lines defy their fate, outliving expectations through resilience, self-care, and an indomitable spirit. Perhaps the true lesson of palmistry is not to fear the marks on our hands, but to take control of the life they represent. Across the ages, countless tales have emerged of destinies seemingly inscribed upon the palms of men, yet time, like a masterful storyteller, often rewrites the script. Do these delicate lines hold the whispers of fate, or are they merely reflections of the narratives we choose to embrace? The case of the doomed emperor. One of the most infamous cases tied to palmistry is that of Emperor Nicholas II of Russia. It is said that a mystic once examined his palm and warned him of a tragic end. His lifeline, though long, was marked by ominous breaks and intersecting lines, supposedly signifying turmoil and an untimely demise. Despite the grandeur of his empire, Nicholas dismissed the warning, believing that his fate was in his own hands. Yet, history tells a chilling tale. His reign ended in chaos, and his life was cut short in a brutal execution in 1918. Was it destiny unfolding, or merely the weight of history crashing down upon him? the man who outlived his fate. On the opposite end of the spectrum lies the story of a young man in the 20th century who was told by a palmist that he wouldn't survive past 40. Stricken with fear, he became obsessed with his fate, but rather than surrender to despair, he made drastic changes. He adopted a disciplined routine, embraced healthy habits, and cultivated a deep sense of inner peace through meditation. As his 40th birthday approached, he found himself not only alive but thriving. Years later, he visited another palmist who, upon examining his hand, remarked, "Your lifeline is strong, you will live long." The man laughed. What had changed? Not the lines, but his choices. The secret behind the lines: if palmistry were absolute, history would be filled with tales of infallible predictions. Yet, time and again, we see individuals defy their supposed fate. The ancient Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing, but drags along the unwilling." Perhaps our hands do tell a story, but it is one we have the power to rewrite. In a world obsessed with predicting the future, the Buddhist approach offers a refreshing and deeply transformative perspective on life's true essence. Rather than searching for clues in the lines on our palms, Buddhism encourages us to focus on cultivating the inner peace and wisdom that can not only extend our lives but also enrich the quality of our existence. What if the true secret to longevity lies not in fate, but in how we live each day with intention and mindfulness? Mindfulness and meditation, central to Buddhist practice. Mindfulness isn't just about sitting in stillness. It's about immersing ourselves fully in the present moment, letting go of past regrets and future anxieties. Studies have shown that regular meditation can reduce the physical and psychological effects of stress, lower blood pressure, and boost heart health, ultimately leading to a longer, more vibrant life. Ancient Buddhist monks, who dedicated their lives to meditation, are often cited as examples of remarkable longevity, with some living well into their 100s. Compassion and kindness. The Buddha taught that love and compassion are essential to living a fulfilled life. Today, research affirms that acts of kindness not only enrich the lives of others but also enhance our own well-being. When we give love, we receive it in return, often in the form of reduced stress, improved immune function, and greater emotional resilience. In fact, studies have found that compassionate individuals tend to have lower levels of stress hormones, which in turn can contribute to a longer, healthier life. Non-attachment. One of Buddhism's core principles, non-attachment teaches us to release our hold on material possessions and the fear of loss, particularly the fear of death. In a world where many are consumed by the fear of mortality, the Buddha's wisdom shows that accepting impermanence leads to peace. Those who cultivate an attitude of detachment experience less stress, are more adaptable to change, and often live in harmony with themselves and their surroundings. Balanced lifestyle. Buddhism emphasizes living in harmony with nature, which includes caring for our physical bodies. A balanced lifestyle, based on healthy eating, regular physical activity, and restorative sleep, is a powerful contributor to longevity. Ancient Buddhist practices of mindful eating and walking meditation highlight how small, conscious decisions, such as what we eat or how we move, can significantly impact our health and longevity. Right livelihood. The Buddha's teachings on right livelihood stress the importance of pursuing work that is meaningful and free from harm to others. In today's world, many studies show that those who work in stressful, unfulfilling jobs often suffer from burnout, anxiety, and physical illness. Choosing a vocation that aligns with one's values not only brings satisfaction but also reduces the harmful effects of stress, contributing to a longer, more harmonious life. By integrating these practices into our daily lives, we shift from passive acceptance of fate to active participation in our health and happiness. In this way, Buddhism offers a timeless blueprint for extending life, not through predictions, but through conscious, compassionate living. Imagine living without the fear of when your life will end, living instead with the certainty that every moment is a gift. Palmistry may offer intriguing insights, but it can never dictate the exact moment of your death. The truth is, no line on your hand can define your fate. It's the choices you make, the life you lead, and the love you cultivate that truly shape your journey, now is the time to stop letting fear rule your life. Instead of obsessing over what's out of our control, let's focus on what we can control, how we live. Live with purpose. Take care of your health, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Cultivate wisdom, kindness, and compassion towards others. These are the things that not only bring peace but also contribute to the longevity of a fulfilling life. Buddhism teaches us that it's not how long we live, but how deeply we live that matters. Whether or not you believe in palmistry, the path to a long, meaningful life lies in living mindfully and with intention. Today, choose to live in the present, embracing each moment with gratitude. Start by making one conscious choice for your well-being, whether it's practicing mindfulness, eating a nourishing meal, or extending kindness to someone in need. We are building a community of mindful, compassionate individuals. Join us by subscribing and sharing your journey in the comments below. Let's support each other in embracing life with wisdom, joy, and peace. Your life is shaped by the energy you put into it. Live fully. Live wisely.